So now that we discussed the judgments of God in Revelation, that kind of showed us a timeline of the entire tribulational period of 7 years, we can now get back to the story and see where it heads. So, in the Bible, it does specifically state that the tribulation is broken into two halves. You have the first half, which is 3.5 years, and you have a second half that's another 3.5 years, for a total of 7 years. And something significant happens at the middle of this tribulational period, and that would be the breaking of the covenant with Israel by the king of the West. And so that's kind of a big prophecy. It was shown to us in Daniel. It's also shown to us in the book of Revelation. So in both the Old and New Testaments, this is a kind of a big deal that everybody's waiting for. And as we head into the tribulation, we do so knowing that the king of the West obviously has ulterior motives. But at this point in world relations, it would just have to count as an unknown at this point. So in the previous video, we noticed that Russia and the king of the South waged war with each other, and the king of the North, which is Russia, defeated the king of the South, and then moved on to Israel to wipe out the Jews once and for all. There was a divine intervention, and the king of the North was destroyed by God himself. However, that gives rise to the king of the West, who then guarantees a military or perhaps even a political pact with Israel, and we go from there. So I just wanted you to know that the tribulation is divided, however, in the Bible by two halves. So we have the first half and the second half. The first half is known as the tribulation. The second half is known as the Great Tribulation. So it's like an escalation of sorts. So what I did, how I like to view both halves of this entire 7-year tribulation, I like to break it down in quarters. It's like a football game. So we have first and second quarter of the first half, and then we have the third and fourth quarter of the second half. And so in this case, the king of the West arises and makes a military and political pact with Israel. This all happens in the first quarter of the tribulational period. And each quarter would be 21 months, by the way. We know that each half in the Bible, each half is 3.5 years. And so you get a total of 7 years. So half of 3.5 is 21 months, right? So 3.5 years is 42 months. So you just take half of that. So we'll quarter it. And so the first quarter of tribulation is the first 21 months. And so we'll show you what happens, or at least what I think will happen, in the first quarter of the tribulation. And so it's important to know, too, that as tribulation gets started in the first quarter, that after the rapture, there really is nobody evangelizing the world for Jesus Christ. And the church, the true church, has been caught out. The false church has been left behind right here. And there's a lot of religious people in the false church. A lot of good people. There's nothing bad about them, per se. They just simply don't believe in Christ. And so we have a lot of religious people in the world, but nobody really believes in Christ. And so God himself has an answer. The important thing to know or to note about the rapture of the church, this is a supernatural event, And basically, the rapture ends the age of human isolation, if you will. In other words, angels in the tribulation will reveal themselves. Now, if you watch Ancient Aliens on History Channel, they talk about full disclosure. They're expecting the governments of the world to admit that they've been talking to aliens. Well, in a way, the angels themselves come out in the tribulation, both good and bad, and or the elect and fallen, as the Bible would call it. We'll just say good and bad for now. And so this really is basically a full disclosure moment, if you will. And so if you're a fan of Ancient Aliens, in a way, angels are not human. So therefore, they're in a way alien to us. So what happens is that God sends the gospel angel, or what I call the gospel angel, to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ all throughout the world, out in the open. Everyone's going to see this. And this is in the book of Revelation. And he does this because there simply is no evangelical body out there at the moment of rapture, as we enter into the first quarter tribulation, to spread the gospel. The Jews are in their own little world with their Judaic religion. The old Christian churches they're still there, but they just have religious people. They don't really follow Christ. And so the vast majority of the world is paganisque. So imagine if an alien came throughout the world and started talking about Christ. Well, that's a big deal. And so what will happen is that slowly people will start believing in Christ, even though the church is officially caught out in heaven, and we only have religious people in the old church institutions that were left behind. And so the angel here goes throughout the whole world presenting the gospel of Christ. Now, it's a free will decision. People are going to accept it. A lot of people are going to reject it, even coming from an angel. So they rejected Jesus Christ. He was the God-man. And, if people rejected the salvation message of Christ, and they rejected the salvation message coming from the church, are they going to reject the salvation message coming from an angel assigned to deliver it to the whole world? Yes, absolutely. Sad to say. People will probably be suspicious of it. Maybe they'll think it's a plot, Maybe it's the globalists trying to, use, I don't know. I have no idea why people reject it, but they will. Some will accept, though. Some will believe. And that'll be the nascent start of the saints in the tribulational period. So, a saint is somebody who believes in the Lord, by the way. It's not merely somebody who is a good person, quote unquote. So you have a lot of atheists and pagans and religious people that are good people, but they don't believe in the Lord. And so they are not saints. So what we have here is, slowly but surely we have saints that pop up back in the population, and because of this gospel angel, right? And then slowly, these are the saints of the tribulation. But these are not church-age saints, so this is important to note. There are saints in every dispensation, right? When Adam and Eve were cast out of the garden, they still believed in the Lord. They would be called a saint. Even though there was no Israel, there were no 10 Commandments, there was no church, but they did believe in the Lord, and they would be called a saint. In a time, and of course during the time before Israel, anybody that believed in the Lord would be a saint. Abraham, according to the apostles, was a saint. Even though there was no such thing as Israel. Abraham's the father of the Jews, Moses is the father of Israel. Moses, in many ways, is like the George Washington of Israel. But Abraham was the father of the Jews. He really started the Jewish race, the 12 tribes. And but Abraham was a saint, and he was a saint by faith. Okay, he didn't do any good deeds. All he did was believe in the Lord, and the Lord imputed righteousness to him. So says the apostles. And and this is what we're going to see here during the tribulation. The gospel angel will go out, spread the gospel. Some will believe. Okay, these will be the new saints of the tribulation, as all the old saints were raptured up into heaven and are now with the Lord in resurrection bodies. So, but these saints are just, people that believe in the Lord. And, there's still going to be lots of other people, religious people, who are not going to believe in the Lord. But those are not saints, just to let you know. So another thing happens in the first quarter of the tribulation, the first 21 months. So after the gospel angel spreads the gospel of Jesus Christ, and then we have this nascent body of believers called the saints in the tribulation, another angel goes out, and he actually does something very interesting and very unusual. He actually goes out and looks for the 12 tribes of Israel. And amongst the 12 tribes of Israel, somehow, I don't know how he's able to use some kind of technology of some sort or something spiritual, I'm not sure how, but is able to identify the 12 tribes of Israel throughout the world. And his task is to mark 12,000 men from each tribe and set them aside for a special military purpose. Now, each person that this angel marks is a Jewish male. There are no females in this particular army. So if it's 12,000 from each tribe, and there's 12 tribes, then you're looking at an army of about 144,000. Well, exactly 144,000. And I like to refer to this army, it's a human army. There's nothing supernatural about it. They're not angelic. This is not the church. And they do believe in the Lord, but they are specifically Jewish. And I call them the Jewish Corps. We have the Marine Corps, right? And the Marine Corps is anywhere between 150,000 to 200,000 men, depending on what year it is. And so so it's kind of the similar size, really, in terms of the numbers, right? So this Jewish Corps, this angel, goes about marking these people, these men, and basically enlists them into a new army. And this angel does something very specific, and that is places a mark upon their forehead. Now you say, forehead, what's this all about? Well, as we get going in the tribulation, things really ramp up, and bad things really ramp up. And so this particular Jewish corps of 144,000 men, 12,000 from each tribe, this angel supernaturally marks them as special, apparently. And we're going to note later how important this mark is on their forehead. Now, a lot of commentators, Bible commentators, have mentioned that when the 144,000 are established, they will go throughout tribulation spreading the gospel of Christ. Well, I'm going to suggest no. Why is that? Well, I think their purpose is actually clandestine. I think their purpose is actually a secret mission of sorts. Now, these are 12,000 men from each tribe, and they may tell their family and friends about Christ. I'm not sure, but I don't really think they're the main body to evangelize the world. But what's interesting about this marking, it's mentioned in Revelation, and it's mentioned right before the trumpet judgments, by the way. And what's interesting about this, we know in the world today that most Jews live in Israel and in one other country. Basically, 2 countries in the world today host the majority of Jews, and I think about 90%, maybe 95%. The first country that is Jewish, of course, is Israel. The second country that hosts most Jews is the United States of America. So, what does this mean? Now, there is a smattering of Jews like in South America and odd places in the Middle East. It's few in number, right? And there's some in Europe too, by the way. But majority are in the United States, other than Israel. And so we know from the trumpet judgments that God is not going to send an asteroid strike on Israel. So remember earlier I had mentioned that an asteroid strike hits North America. Well, this is the other reason why I believe that that is the case, because what we have here is the marking angel that marks the forehead of each of these Jews, tells the trumpet angels that are about to execute the trumpet judgments of Operation Wormwood. This angel actually tells those angels to hold their fire. Why? Why is this angel telling these other angels to hold their fire? Well, that's because this angel needs to mark the members of this Jewish corps. Basically, that's to induct them or enlist them. In order to enlist them, he has to go to the actual location where these Jews live. Well, that by logical deduction would have to be over here in North America. That means this angel goes here and looks and finds a majority of that Jewish corps. And so that kind of tells us, if this angel is telling the trumpet angels to hold their fire, that would imply that North America is on the target list, if you will, of God's wrath. So, but just like when Lot was in Sodom, God did not destroy Sodom because of the righteousness of Lot. Not that not that Lot was a good person, but he was a believer in the Lord, and God's righteousness was in him, which is why he was a righteous person. He was the only person, by the way, who was righteous in Sodom, which is a warning of sorts if you read more into that. But God held back the destruction of Sodom until Lot was removed. He basically left the city. After Lot left the city was destroyed. And so in a similar vein, we see the marking angel enlist these Jewish men into the Jewish corps. And this marking angel tells the trumpet angels to hold their fire. And so therefore, we have to conclude that North America is where most of these Jewish men will join the Jewish corps. And so eventually, I'm going to show them as these guys here on a horse. Eventually, this Jewish corps is going to make their way, I believe, back to Israel. And there's going to be a reason for this, as you will soon find out. So the angel marks the Jewish corps, and they therefore make their way clandestinely back to Israel. Okay, so they'll come back to Israel, and that's where they're ultimately going to go. And there's a reason for this. We're gonna show this, but all this happens in the first quarter of the tribulation, and it seems innocuous enough. Nobody's dying. Nobody's being rounded up. And so there's no big battles or anything, but this is a recruitment drive of the utmost importance. And this Jewish corps is specifically cited in Book of Revelation.